All right, welcome to the Big Texas Podcast presented by Texas Young Republicans. I am your host, Jordan Overturf, coming to you 2 days before the end of early voting. That's right, you got 2 days left. And if you're listening on today, the Thursday before the Friday, where early voting ends. Look, you guys can do math, right? 2 days, today, tomorrow. If you're listening to this on the weekend, well, then you already missed your chance, and you're going to have to go vote like me on Tuesday, Super Tuesday, March 3rd Tuesday, that Tuesday. That is when you will get your chance to cast your ballot. Data shows that actually about half of Texas voters show up on election day, the other half spread out over 2 weeks. I don't understand that math. How do we get 50% of voters showing up over a 2 week span and then another 50% show up on the day? I don't know. Someone explain it to me. Corrections department, get on it. I have a surprise guest today. We have primaries going on, and I know I said that we weren't going to bring on any new guests who are in the challenge primary, but you know what? When a candidate reaches out, we make sure and reach back out to them and make it happen. So my guest today is Jeff McFarland. He is one of several Republican candidates who are running in Texas 23, the congressional district, to replace outgoing U.S. Rep. Will Hurd. This is going to be an interesting race to watch as we go forward. It is, it's considered the only swing district in the state of Texas, a true swing district. Data will show us whether that's true or not by the end of this primary, but I digress. Jeff doesn't care about that. He cares about energy, oil and gas, a major component to the economy there in TX23. And he talks a lot about that, his experience in that industry and what he wants to do to bring change to Washington, D.C. I had a good time talking to him. As always, I appreciate candidates who make time for us, who make time for you, the listeners, for Texas Young Republicans at any time. So I'm going to get out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Jeff McFarland.
It's pretty good. You know, it's been cold today, getting out block walking and talking with voters, but we have such a dedicated team. I'm so grateful for our volunteers who are out at the polls and for the folks that are hitting hundreds and even thousands of doors. I'm so grateful to them. So, you know, rain or shine, we're going to be out there doing our best.
Excellent. Well, so for people who don't know about you, Jeff, can you give us just a quick little rundown of your background and experience?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Just so that you know, I was raised by pastors, and these were the best type of pastors. Not the kind that, you know, we make jokes about PKs and all that. I had very humble, very wise parents. But so they set me up with kind of the principles and values that have guided me through my life. So whenever I start to share my story, I want you to know that's kind of the underpinning, and that I was not raised wealthy by any means. Anything I wanted to do as a kid, I had to go mow lawns to pay for. So I found out, though, that I could start a business for $18. And it's something I'd like for all of your young Republican listeners to know, is that you can go down and start a business for $18. Some courthouses, it's in the 20s. But I went down and started a business at 19 years old. I started an engineering company. So I did not go to college, but I never dropped out. I never started. I just knew that I was kind of going to fast track, and I wasn't being arrogant or anything. I am an obsessive learner, and I wanted to learn and apply and learn and apply. And one of the things that I say from time to time is that training doesn't always work, but work always trains. And I was just ready to jump in. So and when I say we, it's I, but everything I've done, I've had teams and employees and stuff around me. But we ended up growing a very successful engineering company. We then merged that company off, and I wanted to get into the oil and gas industry. And I have been in the oil and gas industry since that time on many sides of it. So I started off in the service side, which was, you know, out on location. We had folks that were working hard, long hours, 24 hours a day. And then I got into the land and kind of like business deal side, like mergers and acquisitions. But, I go out and lease property and put packages together. And the biggest one that I ever did was about 9,000 acres. And so I had some good wins there. And then I was asked to come back to a large company and be an executive with them. So that's what I've been doing ever since. But also on the side, I've gotten involved in real estate, mostly industrial type real estate, like ports and terminals and these kind of things. So that's a little bit of my professional history. But personally, my wife and I, we fell in love when we were teenagers. I was an old soul. So we fell in love when we were teenagers. We got married young. We had kids in the first 2 years. So I currently have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So that's kind of the landscape of kind of personal background, professional background, and we currently live in San Antonio, and we are in the district.
Excellent.
So there's a little background.
Where were you doing those deals at when you were working on the land acquisition side of things?
All out in West Texas. Thank you for asking that. In the district, actually. So we're talking Pecos County, Reeves County, just the heart of what's known as the Delaware Basin. And I'm not going to get too into things, into the details or the weeds here, but the biggest boom in America right now for oil and gas is called the Delaware Basin. And so it's a really big deal to have someone who understands oil and gas representing this district, because I pulled the numbers. I'm the only one that's done it. I went county by county, and our district produces over 45 million barrels of oil per month. We produce over 209 million units of gas. They measure that in MCF. And that ends up being over $3.5 billion a month. And believe me, there's not just despite what the late night television tells you or the left tells you, it's not oil companies are getting filthy rich. It's $3.5 billion that's going into jobs and wages and health insurance and all of the things. The energy jobs are great jobs. And if we let the left win here, then it's really going to crater our district. And, these are jobs that when they're gone, they cripple every other industry. Yeah.
Well, and that includes,
I did deals all over the district.
And that includes the state of Texas, which depends heavily on oil and gas revenues that fund our schools, public schools, our economic stabilization fund, the rainy day fund is dependent heavily on that industry. So certainly as we look at the Green New Deal and these proposals by the left, it has to give more than a few people heartburns, but also it seems like the market is turning more and more toward renewable energy. Is that something that you have seen, and where will you stand when it comes to renewable energy issues?
Man, thank you for bringing this up. So what surprises a lot of people is I've actually helped kickstart numerous solar projects out in West Texas. So I have a very high level of understanding of renewables, just because I have worked in that space a little bit, because the same folks that own oil and gas properties, they do good with solar panels. So I have been there, and so a renewable company reached out to me because of my depth of understanding in oil and gas. I knew how to go and speak with the ranchers and the landowners to make sure that they understood we were going to build these solar fields in a way that would not inhibit their access to oil and gas, fossil fuels, these kind of things. So I was able to set up properties that were actually dual use, where they were oil and gas and renewables. So I'm very familiar with it. But to answer your question, and I love being able to really talk in depth about these things, because a lot of times when you're talking with people on the campaign trail, they just want to hit like their 5 hot buttons. So thank you for letting me do this. But there's only enough rare earth metals. The acronym is REM, REM, rare earth metals in the world to switch over energy production. Like 15% of the global energy supply could be transformed. And I like to tell people We love that the wind and the sun are renewable, but the components needed to capture that energy are consumable. And so you go around the world and you look at these rare earth mines where they're getting, the lithium and all of these other metals that are hard to pronounce, and they're strip mining. Some of these strip mines are 3 and 4 miles across, and it's like an inverted cone, right? They just cone down into the ground, which, by the way, is full of big D9 caterpillars, and they're burning so much diesel to mine these metals. It's unbelievable. But there's only enough of the rare earth metals to convert 15% of the global energy production. So, like it or not, renewables simply cannot take over, quote, if you will. But we have a platform called Ethical Energy. I believe everyone can remember it. Ethical energy applies to oil and gas, renewables, nuclear, whatever you want to say. It applies to all of them. It's 4 simple things. We want safe and humane working conditions. We want at least average or above average compensation for anyone in the energy sector. We want a commitment to lower or minimize environmental impact. And then lastly, we want a commitment to reclaim or restore the environment after the project. So 4 simple things, and the Ethical Energy platform I have already run by some of the biggest movers and shakers in the oil and gas industry, in the renewables industry, and everyone's behind it. So it's a simple way, but that's a little bit about renewables. If you have any other specific questions, please let me know.
Well, not to bring you back to the world of campaigns, but you mentioned that when you're out talking to voters on the campaign trail, they want to give you 5 hot button issues. I won't hold you to that many, but what do you think are the top 2 issues outside of oil and gas that voters are talking to you about?
Well, I'd like to first just separate. I get asked this a lot, and I'm pretty introspective, and I've nailed it down to there's issues of the mind and there's issues of the heart. And the issues of the heart are the social issues, right? And then the issues of the mind are your dinner, kitchen table issues of balancing your own budget, having higher wages, health insurance, these type things. And so it depends on where you go. Along the southern parts of the district, there's a lot of push for higher wages, better paying jobs down along the border. And so we have some really strong plans to help develop more economic opportunities down there. And we have full-blown plans on how to get more manufacturing. It's something that's called the China Charter that we are going to use to incentivize companies to move their manufacturing back home from Asia into the United States with the successes of USMCA and the fact that we have 3 major ports of entry here in Texas. So many products come through our border, and we should have incredible manufacturing, because when you look at the analytics, I guess you'd say, of why should we manufacture things where? Well, I'll tell you this: we have very reasonable cost of real estate, very reasonable cost of construction. We have an employment base that is desperate for better paying, more secure jobs. And so if we get these special economic development zones set up where we've identified the real estate construction, employment base, state laws, local laws, these type of things, we can roll out the red carpet for people who are considering moving their manufacturing here to America. And that needs to happen in the southern parts of the district. So those are some of the issues of the mind. Term limits is huge. Everyone wants term limits that we talk with. I've yet to meet voters who think term limits are an awful idea. So we are huge proponents of term limits. I'm one of the only candidates that is taking a cut in pay to be in Congress. I am not doing this for a personal step up. If any of your listeners want to go and do some research on the other folks in our campaign, you will find that for many of them, this is a huge step up in their personal finances. And for us, we are here to serve, and we believe that's how it should be. Whenever you look at, I would love to do a study, and with maybe some of your reach, it'd be fun to see if you have anybody willing to do this. It'd be fun to do a study of when congressmen's net worth skyrockets. Is that around year 6 or 8 or 12 or 14? I don't know. But that's probably a good place to start the conversation on term limits, because we want people that are experienced, but we don't want people that are so experienced they feel like now they've got it in the bag and they no longer need to serve the people to get reelected. So they spend the rest of their congressional career filling their pockets. That's a problem.
Well, you hear him. You hear him, Evan Smith, in Texas Tribune. If you're listening, that's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge from Jeff McFarland of a hot tip you can go track down. So with term limits, what do you think is a reasonable cap on the amount of time a person should serve in Congress?
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm asking someone to do a study for me. My personal, I've narrowed it down to no less than 6 years, no more than 12. I think if we could start making some steps towards that direction, it would be really good. I can understand why some people only want 6. I've looked at 12 because I'm thinking 2 senator terms, 5 or 6 congressional terms, and we go from there. So, you know, I don't have a hard answer for you. I'm just being honest. I'm always be humble and just tell you, you know, that's kind of the range I'm looking at, and I want to get more study to nail down my personal convictions. But I do know there's a lot of momentum behind 6 years in Congress. And if that's what people wanted to do, I would support it 100%. Like I said, I'm here to serve the will of the people.
Well, and if you put term limits in, it would be real interesting to see what happens in the speaker shakeups, right? Because at that point, you're looking at someone, you know, being elevated who is at least a 3-term incumbent to lead for another 3 terms, you know, unless, you know, a rock star comes out of somewhere and they just elect him in the 2nd term.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see what would happen if a Nancy Pelosi were to be forced out at some point, if Chuck Schumer would be forced out at some point.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a great point.
So
hey, and can I backtrack on one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I forgot to tell your listeners on the oil and gas part. Just one interesting question. How many congressmen in the United States do you believe have oil and gas experience or any energy experience at all?
Are we are we including AOC in that? Because she's clearly an expert based on the Green New Deal.
Oh God, that's so good. Yeah. But I've asked this question all over the district, and I have people that say 40. That's a really common answer. I have other folks that have said 60 and 80, but I'm here to tell you right now, there's only 2 congressmen in the U.S. House with energy experience, and neither one of them are seeking reelection. Therefore, we run the risk of having no one on the floor of Congress that can speak intelligently or articulately about America's energy industry, our energy independence, or policy. And so I forgot to say that earlier, and thank you for letting me divert the conversation, but that is a very sobering fact, because tied to America's energy independence is our national security, our economic dominance. All of these things are tied to energy. And so, again, thank you for letting me sidetrack that.
Well, and you've certainly got the energy part down, so I don't think anyone's really going to question your experience there, but you're also talking about Texas 23. And you can't talk about this district without bringing up the border. It stretches the longest expanse of the Mexico border. Where do you stand on this issue, and what are some policy solutions that you are proposing?
Yeah. So, number one, I want to bring up a very important foundational idea, and that is that the border is about more than illegal immigration to me. We should learn to bring this distinction that trafficking destroys American families, that drug trafficking, these drugs that are coming over the border, are destroying American families. I have had employees, I have had friends, and I have had family members who have dealt with the substance abuse with these drugs, and they abort the destinies of so many of our youth. And so building a wall, which I do support, I don't want to dance around it, but building a wall is about more than illegal immigration to me. And second to the drug trafficking is the human trafficking. My wife and I are very passionate about, doing our part to end human trafficking, especially as it relates to child trafficking. So we have a platform called Act Now, ACT. That's an acronym for Abolish Child Trafficking. And it must happen in our generation. And we were speaking with a group of middle schoolers, which is a real joy. If you don't ever go to a middle school history class to talk about politics, you are missing out on a lot of fun. And so we were there, and these kids, we were talking to them about a border and getting all kinds of fun ideas about their thoughts on the border. And we began to talk about trafficking. And by the end of it, the kids were saying, if you could deter people from trafficking children across the border, why would you not build a wall? And it was a really sobering fact to them because they had never really considered that. And I think that sadly, a lot of Americans haven't considered it because drug trafficking is not a partisan hot button, right? Illegal immigration is a partisan hot button. So that's all people talk about. But we must secure our borders in the aspect of trafficking just as importantly. And I support the president's initiatives like Remain in Mexico. This has done a great job to stem the tide of illegal immigration, and we should build a wall, especially at the hot button areas. We should deploy the technologies just like we've already begun to deploy. But here's the laughing stock about some of this stuff. There's so much money in building virtual walls, but there's not much money in brush cutting. And for some reason, they failed to do the simple things in pursuit of doing the really lucrative things. And that is infuriating to me. Our Border Patrol need brush clearing so that they can see from the roads to the river. And also the $6+ billion, I believe it was, and y'all can fact check me. I'm just telling you, I think it was about $6 billion on this virtual wall. That we're finding that lots of the areas don't even work because of the denseness of the brush. It keeps the sensors from working right, and that's just atrocious. And the fact that there's been none of it done is crazy. Now, cedar and mesquite trees, for any Texas people, especially hill country or Southwest Texas people, they understand that cedar and mesquite are absolute water thieves. These little invasive trees drink between 7 and 20 gallons of water a day. But did you know that we could actually start doing this strategic clearing, and we could turn that brush into ethanol? And if anybody's listening, you can go do a fun Google. Just type in converting cedar or mesquite into ethanol. The amount that you can produce out of an acre of dense brush is actually crazy. And so it won't just be like a total rubbish pile for 800 miles. We can set up areas that help bring jobs to that area of the border. So, we kind of hit on the wall, on immigration, trafficking, brush clearing. I think that's just about all of it.
Well, it certainly is clear that you have a passion for, harnessing as much energy as possible from this district. But yeah, sure as Boomtown knows the good times, they also know the bust. So as you talk about, bringing manufacturing jobs home to the U.S. and to TX23, how do you make that work with some of the obstacles that are just commonplace for a rural district like that?
Well, it actually helps to hedge against it, right? So right now, like it or not, most of the parts of our district are fueled, if you will, no pun intended, by either oil and gas or ranching. And when I say ranching, I also include hunting. Because that's become a really big business down in the area. So the manufacturing is left. Therefore, there's not enough economic diversity. Oil, gas, ranching, hunting is not enough to have a well-balanced community that is somewhat resistant to the boom and bust cycles that we've become very accustomed to. And this is why we want to have something called Big Idea Days. And I haven't been talking about this enough, but it's something I'm so passionate about because I usually don't have the time to do so. But we want to bring out the dreamers. We want to have leaders of all different types of industries that come out for one, like, 3-day kind of extended weekend, and we call out the dreamers, the big idea guys, and we put them in front of the brightest leaders in the area, the financiers, the state and local and federal leaders. Just and no one's giving speeches here. Okay, we just want conversation starters, and put the smart folks in the room and just let them go, and let's hear the big ideas. Like whoever decided to build all of the battery manufacturing out in the desert in Nevada is a winner in my book. But you know what? His idea sounded totally crazy to somebody at some time. And we need to build a platform, if you will. And I would like to use my congressional seat to do this, to build a platform for the dreamers, for the big idea guys to show up and say, look, this is something no one is talking about, but it could be transformative to the way that we do life, to the way that we produce energy, to the way that we, pay our bills, whatever it is, to the way that we farm, agriculture. There's so much advancements right now coming out of Israel and other places that we need a champion in the district to pull these great cutting edge ideas and plant them in the 23rd district so that they can grow and, blossom and support families.
So did you get a chance to catch any of that presidential debate this week?
I caught some of it. It was very underwhelming. Some of these folks are just, they've lost their mind. They're so out of touch with reality.
Is there any issue you think is most threatening to Texas that they're out there supporting?
Well, there's without question, the Green New Deal is what comes to my mind. The Green New Deal and all the climate change activism is absolutely atrocious. I think that we have some other major issues like gun confiscation, Second Amendment stuff. I will always stand for our Second Amendment rights. But a lot of people across our district, for instance, if let's just say that, a lot of ranchers, if they see some bad guys coming up the road, they don't have time to call the sheriff and have someone come out. They have to go run to their closet, grab a shotgun or a rifle or whatever it is, and defend themselves. And whenever you have these out of touch, urban, city-centered people talking about gun confiscation, we're talking about a very, very fundamental right of our nation. And it's not about hunting. It's about, being able to defend yourself and defend yourself from, threats, both, just violent people and also a tyrannical government. They understood that weapons in the hands of civilians was the secret to liberty from tyranny. That's why they wrote it, and that's why we should defend it with everything we've got. And I will never support legislation that will hurt our Second Amendment rights. So that's something that definitely scares me. And to be honest, as Republicans, I think that it's a real gift that these Democrats have lost their mind and started going towards socialism and gun confiscation, because there's a lot of folks in our nation who are leaving the Democratic Party because they want no part of socialism or taking away our rights. But the left is here saying, look, give me your rights today, and I promise that someday it'll be better for you. And that's a promissory note that no government's been able to make good on. So we should not trust anyone with socialist ideas.
So as we wrap up here, I got kind of a two-parter for you. Here's your chance to talk directly to the voters in TX23, and now's the time to do it because the time left to vote is dwindling quickly.
Yeah.
So why did you get into this race, and why should the people who live in TX23 vote for Jeff McFarland?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that I got into the race, and this will tie into why they should vote for me as well, is because I looked at the landscape of candidates that had already filed, and it was not good. I looked at people that were, angry, and they were running campaigns on like, I'm angry, you're angry, vote for me, we'll all be angry together. And if anger could make our nation better, then we would be in a better spot. I'm really frustrated. I was really frustrated because I did not want any of these people representing me. You know, my parents taught me that anger is reserved for people who lack the wisdom to change the situation. See, if you want to make a measurable difference in the world, it's going to take some real wit and wisdom. You're going to have to know what motivates people. How do you negotiate? How do you get out ahead and have the advantage? And as someone who started out with nothing at 19 years old starting a company, I know how to win on a level playing ground. I know how to outmaneuver, out-negotiate, and just understand what needs to be done to win. And a lot of these congressmen, they were writing checks, or these candidates, they were writing checks that I knew their attitude would not allow them to cash. Like, for instance, if me and you were going to do a deal, and I want to buy your company in 2 months, but I spend the next 3 weeks all over the airwaves saying, I can't stand you, I'm going to tear down everything you built, and you're going to regret the day you ever dealt with me. What are the odds of me getting a favorable deal from you? They're gone, right? And so we had these candidates who were running around just loose cannons, and you can go research them. In fact, to any voters listening, I would urge you, whoever you think the front runners are in our race, please go and just listen to them. The best thing you could ever do for me is listen to them, and you'll understand exactly why I jumped into the race. They are so underwhelming. There is not a depth of knowledge of foreign aid, foreign trade, economy, job creation. There's just nothing there. They just give the boilerplate, hot button answers, and when you ask them for a deeper explanation, you get non-answers and just total whiff. So please look at them. Another reason that the voters should vote for me, and one reason I jumped in the race, is because no one in the race can beat Gina Ortiz-Jones like I can. I'm the only one that doesn't have the damaging opposition research. I've ran a clean life. My wife and I, like I said, got married young, business young. We're an old souls, and I know I'm the only one that can out debate her. Put me on a stage. You've been listening to me now for 30 minutes or whatever. I can get up on a stage and hit her hard with wit and wisdom and overcome her on a debate stage. No one else in the race can do it like I can. And then also just take a look at our momentum. Everywhere you go, we have hundreds, if not thousands of people that are falling in to the McFarland camp every day. They're giving us their votes. They're giving us their dollars. They're giving us their hearts. Why is this? Because they're listening to the things we're talking about. They understand that we're really here to serve. We're taking a cut and pay to do this. And whenever we hit on the issues, they can tell the authenticity and the genuineness in us, and in their heart, they know I'm right. So they're voting for us. And so I would make a plea to all your voters, please vote for me, volunteer with us, get to know us. I'll even give you my phone number. You're welcome to call us, because we want to be reachable. We want to listen to people and make measurable changes in this district.
Well, that's perfect transition into our last question, which is always, if people want to find out more about you and your campaign, what's your website, social media, all that stuff?
Yeah, please find us on Facebook. It's Jeff McFarland TX. But, if you just go in there and write Jeff McFarland for Congress, it'll pop up. And then our website is McFarlandforCongress.com. And that's where you can, see some of our high-level stuff. You can also make donations there should you choose to do that. And then you can also find us on Twitter. And we're on all the major platforms. So just go search for us and follow what we're doing. We put out a great video today about endorsement and the obligations that come with endorsements, and why I'm warning people and letting people know that a list of endorsements is really a list of obligations, and should be very careful to read too much into them. So go watch our videos today, follow us, and vote for us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again to Jeff for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you have not voted yet, you need to press pause and get your tail to a polling location. Of course, you have to be registered to vote in the primary, which may be why you're not voting, in which case get registered. Because if you can't vote in this one, you can vote in the next one. Next uniform election date's in May. And then the big one, the one everyone will be talking about, burning your ears off. talking about as November 2020. But before we get to that, I promise you lots of data breakdown. I'm going to drill down into who's turning out, where they're turning out, where we need to get more Republicans active. And if you want to take part in that conversation, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast. You can also follow Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Texas YRs. And make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, YouTube, this thing's everywhere. Hit the subscribe button. And while you're there, also, if you got a chance and you really like what you're hearing, leave us a rating. I hear it's good for us. It pumps the podcast up so more people can find it. Share it with a friend. Let them know that, if they want to be informed before they cast their ballot, hopefully early, they're going to listen to this right away and then go out and make an informed decision at the ballot box, because that's what we want from our voters, right? An informed decision at the ballot box. Also, remember, there are 10 primary propositions on the ballot, primary ballot propositions. So make sure you take part in those. If you want information about that, you could go to texasyr.gop. And if you like podcasts and you really like listening to Texas politics, make sure you check out the RPT podcast, Let's Talk Texas. I am hosting that one as well, so this is not a shameless plug. In any case, thank you so much for all you guys are doing. I know the people who are listening to this are informed, they're engaged, they're getting active. Thank you to all the YR chapters who have done their part. We got a day of action on Saturday, February 29th. So we are going to be doing our part to reach out to more young Republican voters. And if you want to find out more about that, again, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Texas YRs. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking part. Till then, friends, we'll see you down the road.